Hi folks, it's Willie here again. Today I'm going to be live coding and going into how one might solve Leetcode question number 2, add two numbers. This is a good medium difficulty problem for those who want to practice with linked lists, as despite the initial simplicity, there are nuances that will need to be coded into the algorithm. The reason I'm doing these live coding videos is to hopefully demonstrate the approach that one might take in an actual interview when explaining their thought process while they code to the interviewer. So yeah, with that, let's get started. Let's go over the problem. So you are given two non-empty linked lists representing two non-negative integers. The digits are stored in reverse order, and each of their nodes contain a single digit. Add the two numbers and return it as a linked list. You may assume the two numbers do not contain any leading zero except the number 0 itself. And yeah, so let's go through the example. So we have as an input two linked lists. They represent the numbers 342 plus 465. And as our answer, we want the number 807, or the linked list representing 807. You'll notice that the linked lists are in reverse order. So we start with the ones digit, then the tens digit, and then the hundreds digit, and so on and so forth for larger numbers. So yeah, I mean, this does seem pretty simple at an initial glance. Something that we can do is we can look at the linked list that we have. We'll start with the nodes corresponding to the ones digit. We'll add those. So 2 plus 5 would equal 7. We'll move on to the next node for each. 4 plus 6 would equal 10. Something to note is that we do need to take into account carryovers. And so 4 plus 6 would equal 10. You would carry over the 1 and create a node with 0 as its value. And then with that carryover of 1, you'd also add 3 plus 4 plus the carryover of 1. That equals 8, and so you would create a node with the number 8 and then return your linked list. Something to note is that the two linked lists might not be the same length, and so something that we'll need to take into account is if the current node that we're looking at actually might be a none for one linked list, and we still have to process the second linked list. And so we'll have to take that into account in our code. So yeah, with that, let's get started. Something I like to do when I'm working with any linked list, or when I'm building a linked list, is that I'll actually start off by creating a dummy node. And that's just helpful in terms of not having to sort of initialize initial node with that first value that I want, or first setting my head to none and then having to check in my code if head is none to create a new node and set that to head, or if it's not, then to set the next node, so on and so forth. Creating a dummy node just makes that whole thought process a lot easier and easier to code. I'll also set my tail equal to my initial empty node at the moment, and then I'll also initialize my carryover to be 0. I want to iterate over both linked lists simultaneously, and so to do that I'll use a while loop, and as a condition for my while loop I'll do if L1 is not none, and I'll point L1 and L2 to the next node as I'm iterating and processing, and I've finished processing previous nodes. So if that's not none, or L2 is not none, then I also now I'll start calculating my sum for the node that I want to add to my return value. So my current sum will equal my carryover. So if my carryover is a 1, then current sum will start with 1. I'll set carry back to 0, And now I have to check if I'm looking at nodes that actually have values, right? So if L1 is not none, then current sum, we add the value of L1. And then we move the pointer for L1 to the next node, which may or may not be none. Cool. Similarly for L2, if L2 is not none, then current sum plus equals L2.val, L2 dot, or L2 is equal to L2 dot next. And we'll need to do that there as well. Great. So that has us iterating over both nodes simultaneously. We process each node and we add that to our current sum. Now we need to check whether our current sum has exceeded 9. And if it has, then we need to only keep the digit value and to take into account our carryover. So if current sum is greater than 9, then current sum minus equal 10. That will give us the value for the current node that we want to create, and carry is going to be equal to 1. Now we need to create our new node, and we'll add that to our tail. So tail.next is equal to new node with a value equal to current sum. Tail will need to be pointed to our new node that we just created. And then once we exit, we can return dummy.next. So if you remember, dummy was actually our initial empty node that doesn't actually contain anything. And so dummy.next would be the head of the linked list that we want to return. So yeah, let's run our code and see if it passes. Passes the basic test case. Let's submit and see if it passes all our test cases. And we actually run into an error, right? So we have as our inputs 2 linked lists, 5 and 5, and the result should be 10, but instead we just return 0. And so this is actually because after we exit our while loop, we don't actually take into account that we may have a leftover carryover that we'll need to create a new node for. And so we'll take that into account after we exit. So if carry is equal to 1, then we'll append a new node with the value of that carry, which will be equal to 1. And yeah, let's submit that. And we see with that we actually end up passing our test cases. So yeah, hopefully this video has been helpful at explaining how one might approach this question in an interview. If you guys think this video was useful, please support by liking or subscribing to my channel. Thank you guys in advance.